You can tell her anything. She's a real good listener. You can tell her anything.
Yo, what's up, confidants? It's your girl, Father Longlegs, Teresa Lee. You know, this is You Can Tell Me Anything, the podcast where comedians confess something they want to get off their chest. And this is the quarantine edition. So we've got our guest up on Skype. I'm very excited to introduce him. He is so funny. He's got a very packed calendar, and he's about to do Super Punch after this. So you can check out all his work online. It's Ify Nwadiwe. What's up?
Hey, how you doing? It's so wild because I technically didn't have Super Punch tonight because we were supposed to start our hiatus last week, but they wanted to extend one more week's for hiatus since everyone's at home, and then we'll be on hiatus after this week till May.
Wow.
So.
I mean, the content has to. I mean, people want content. You know, now is the time.
Yeah, people are hungry for the content right now. They need it. They love it. It's been interesting seeing all my friends get into the live stream thing because I always felt weird about it. I felt weird about advertising my Twitch because I'm like, all these comedians are going to see me talking about Twitch and they're gonna be like, what the heck is this? And now, like, you know, comedians are hitting me up being like, yeah, what the heck is this? How do I get on board? Look, I love it.
You're ahead of the curve. Well, before we get too far, I'd like to ask for a good confession just to start on a positive note. Is there something good you want to confess?
Something good I want to confess is, I'm just giving too much money away. Because every time I'm a real sucker for when I get stopped on the street. So like Heifer International, I was a donator for. Ever since Trump's been elected, I've been giving monthly donations to Planned Parenthood. And then now, like, yeah, I've just any and all, like, we did, it was real cool because I can't even take full credit for this. I just kind of jumped on the train and asked everyone to keep the train going. But I think it was Katie Delaney who retweeted someone else who was like, they genuinely were like, oh, I got this extra $35 back from something or another, and I don't need it. If anyone really needs $35, let me know and I'll Venmo it to you. And then Katie was like, oh, same here. And so then I did it, and I was like, same here. And if anyone can keep this going, let's keep it going. And a few homies stepped in. Demi Yadoye, apparently Demi, he said he like went on a walk and forgot to check his phone, so he ended up giving it to everyone in the thread. So just like little ways like that, because right now it sucks, so I'm just trying to make it suck a little less.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I saw something like that. I think that's such a great way to pay it forward. And I actually am I've come around on this because I used to be, when I saw people doing social media giving, I used to feel more icky about it. And this is years and years ago because it felt like, oh, brag. But now I do like to post when I donate because I've noticed, like, sometimes I'll see a friend of mine doing something like that, and it'll prompt me to want to give. So if it has that effect on me,
I know it's such a funny thing because you're so right, because that is the thing, and I feel like that's a good feeling to have and overcome, is to be like, well, I don't want to be show offy, and that's why the only reason I did it was because the nature of it. And you do have to worry because I had to warn, because I noticed because of all those like sugar daddies on Twitter and stuff, if you use the word Venmo or anything like that, you will get randos popping in and be like, I need it and all this stuff, and you'll go and look at their replies and they just are just replying that to everyone, and they're literally searching. And so I probably got by like one or two people, but because I gave to a few, but
like someone collecting money.
Yeah. So I told my friend who I saw do it, I was like, hey, make sure you go through the account to make sure they're a real person and not this weirdo bot accepting Venmos.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's really great, and I think you do deserve props for doing good stuff. And that's why I like to do good confessions, because sometimes it does feel weird to brag, but I'm like, this is your chance to brag. But I did find a tweet of yours. I've been also looking at people's tweets that come on the pod just to be like, here's something funny. because everybody who comes on is someone I think is funny. But I really enjoyed your video you did. It's the how dudes FaceTiming with Bae during the teen video. It's like it's like in a FaceTime framing, and then you're just like trying to get comfortable and like kind of thirst trapping. So you guys should check that.
Yeah.
Check out Ify's Twitter for Gold Star content like that. It's very funny.
Yeah, no, I was trying to FaceTime someone and just like a friend, and that's when I came up with the idea. I was like, oh yeah, you do kind of see how you look when you're doing it. So if you're trying to impress somebody, you'd probably be like, ooh.
Yeah, that's true, and that's like now people are going on dates on FaceTime. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been in this long enough where I feel like that's whole relationships might happen on FaceTime. I don't know. Like people might break up
definitely.
on FaceTime, date and break up on FaceTime.
It's gonna be wild. I was just talking about this the other day, but there's like this mentality of like when people are in boot camp and jail, you notice some people come out in like relationships because you feel so isolated, and someone reaching out, it just feels even more intense and you feel more attached. And I feel like it's going to be real interesting coming out. Like everyone's been making the joke of these quarantine divorces, but these quarantine relationships, watch out for them. It's going to be the person who just checked in on the right person at the right time and finally got to shoot their shot.
Yeah, that is true. It's like the sort of the flip side of a long distance relationship. Like long distance, I feel like can be hard because you know what it's like to be in person, but it can also bring you closer when you're just like, you're pining for someone and it makes you want them more. So I could see how, but then it could really backfire, when they go out in the real world and they're like, actually, I have no chemistry with you, just video chemistry.
Yeah. Only on the videos were you great. In person,
Yeah.
you're not.
Well, I also like to talk a little bit about therapy because this podcast sort of loosely inspired by that. What's your relationship with therapy, and like, have you gone before, or what do you think about all that?
Oh yeah, I went before, and I used to go pretty regularly. And I like therapy, and then like it just was a scheduling thing where I couldn't get the therapist that I want. She was amazing. It was great. And just life happened. But I definitely probably am going to just go back. The health insurance is back in and kicking. So why not,
That's awesome.
I highly recommend therapy for all folk.
Yeah, it is. I came to it so late in life, and now I feel like it's too much my brand, to the point where I'm like, I feel like my therapist has for sure seen my tweets. My therapist has been, my talk therapist has been texting me. And I think at first I thought she was checking in, which I think part of it is, but I think another part is she's probably losing income and trying to low key without asking me to book her. She's probably low key like, hey, you want to do this? So I'm like,
Yeah, how's that brain doing?
Yeah.
You need to get something off your chest.
Yeah, it's interesting to text with your therapist. I've never texted with her this much. But speaking of talking to therapists, Ify, is there anything you would like to tell me?
A big secret that I must confess is that when my daughter's mother always wants my daughter Naomi to eat very healthy things, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna hold down the fort, but I have to confess that when she comes over here, I always try and be the cool dad. I give her lots of snacks. I give her all the goldfish. I give her all the fruit snacks. She gets to watch all her cartoons. Her mom straight up like took the TV out of the living room because she was like, "Oh, you don't need to be watching it that much." So like when she comes here, it's so cute. Like she'll like take her shoes off and like plop on the couch, and then like I'll open up an old goldfish and she'll be like, yeah. And then she'll just be sitting there enjoying her Mickey's Clubhouse. Yeah.
Oh, that's so fun. I mean, like the idea of cool dad, it's funny because I think it's not just that you're doing it because you don't have the other things. I mean, like, because I think like in the past, it's like the idea of like being a weekend dad is like, oh, you just do the cool stuff. But you're like, I'm aware of all these things you need to do. And on top of that, once you do the basics, like I will also want you to have fun. So I'm like, that's such a different spin on it. And also because your job is kind of entertainment, it truly does feel like it's like bonding with your child when you're like, yes, you should watch these shows. You should enjoy the video games.
Yeah. I know it's so interesting too, because I definitely think that gives me a bias towards like TV, because there are so many parents that talk about screen time this, screen time that, and it is like it's kind of like a Luddite view to me, because it's almost like we remove our understanding of how media is now versus how it was then. Whereas like there was something between, and which a lot of us did, and admittedly, which I always think is a true betrayal, where it's like, oh, you grew up in front of the TV, but now that you're a parent, you're like, no, like that's the main thing we accused our parents of doing. But then also it's the thing of like, before when we were younger and we'd sit in front of the TV, you'd sit in front of the TV and you just never knew what would pop up. It would be commercials all these times making us want this, and it would just be like whatever was on, because, you know, the kids block was only for so long. Whereas now you can literally curate what your child is getting, and it is educational, edutainment. And I did see like, you know, my daughter coming back to me with words she learned and stuff like that. So I think it's such a funny thing, where I think, because here's the gag of it all, Teresa. And this was the first thing I figured out about being a parent, is no one knows what they're doing. No one knows what they're doing. No, like, because your parents are literally only telling you the stuff that they liked that their parents did to them. And you notice that because you'll know that you're just giving your child the stuff that you liked that your parents gave, and then stuff that you believe. So, you know, like there is no guide. There's no, like there's all these books and stuff, but like it's just another person who went to school for kids. But the first thing that they'll tell you in a lot of these books that are kids are different. They need different things. Everyone has, because you're dealing with an actual human being with a mind who is going to accept and learn things differently.
Yeah, I mean, I used to say that parenting is like, you know, learning, like if you're learning to walk a tightrope, but the first time you ever do it, you are doing it for real, like with no net. And then if you fall, that tightrope makes a podcast about you when they turn 18. So, but it is like kind of true, because it's like, I think, I mean, the fact, what you said, I want to kind of explore that, what you said about like, seems so obvious, but you said like your kid is a human being with thoughts and opinions. I think that is actually a very progressive modern view, because I think in the past that isn't the way parents see their kids. I mean, I think if you ask like, is your child a human being, they'd be like, yeah. But I mean, you go far back enough, they'd, you know, back in like ancient China, they'd be like, no, they're not allowed to do anything. But I think the modern parenting view of like, my child is a human, so what does my child want? And that's like so key, because I think even in the 90s when I was growing up, I don't feel like I was often asked like, what do you want? It was just like, do you like this thing that I want you to do? But it still comes from this place of like, well, I know what's best for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that comes from, and to bring it back to the podcast, back to that therapy thing, because when you, and also just having friends in therapy and talking with them and having these like mental health discussions, when you see just how much of trauma and how much of, you know, who you are comes from just the way you were raised and the way your parents interacted with you, it really does change the way you view parenting. Like every time I talk to her in conversations, that there's always this like thing in the back of my head, even though right now she's so young, it's in the back of my head where it's like how I allow myself to talk to her, how I react to the things she say to me is going to be how she allows herself to be talked to and relate to men. Like this is like this, because I am the first man in her life. I'm one of I am her father figure. Everything that she sees me do, she's going to assume is just how men operate. I mean, there's it's genuinely like interesting when you see how many of the bad qualities, not to even name anyone specifically, but when you see someone, especially in men, when you see their father has a bad quality and then their son picks it up, or if their father has a bad quality and their daughter allows that in their partners, it's just, and it's not like they're actively being like, because my dad do it, it's fine. It's like a subliminal thing because that's how brains work. They, it's woven while we're not even, considering it. So, and that's something I've been thinking about, which is why, like, because the thing in parenting that I'm trying to like disconnect from is, my dad's a Nigerian father, and it was so funny. He his bark was worse than his bite. He never really spanked me that much, but he yelled a lot, and he was very, and it was just like the idea of like I'm frustrated, I'm angry, and like I'm not gonna hurt you, but like Nigerians talk loud, and that's how we talk. And I find that that has infiltrated me in like how I'll just get mad at games, or if I get frustrated, like I'll do. And I've just been trying to course correct on that, and like because I definitely want her to be like if some dude raises her voice to be like, nah, fuck you. If anything,
Yeah.
I'd want her to just tase him.
Wait, oh, you paused for a second. No, I mean, I think I like relate to that, what you said about like bark worse than the bite, because I feel like I have this like memory of growing up with my mom that's like way worse. But when I actually break it down, like there's so many good times, and if I were to really count like the really traumatic times, it's probably not that bad. But I think what parents forget is like it is a child that you're talking to, so yelling is actually much scarier coming from the thing that's supposed to provide your safety.
Exactly.
So it's not just like being yelled at, it's being yelled at by the thing that you were taught like is my source of safety. So that's where a lot of, I think, that trauma comes from. But of course it's like they're doing their best too. So I never point blame fingers, but I think, like you said, I've learned a lot from exploring my own patterns to be like, oh, this is why I'm afraid of this, and not anybody's fault, but now that I understand it, I probably wouldn't want to do that to my kids, but my follow-up too was, so your attitude about like I want my kids to have the snacks and watch the TV shows, like you're big into fandom, and like you clearly have a lot of knowledge about TV shows. What was your childhood like in terms of like watching TV? Was like, what was your relationship with entertainment and that's like sort of fun aspects of life? Like, was it a thing you got to do when you finished all your homework, or did you sneakily do it? Like, kind of, I guess, are you mirroring that with your daughter, or is it the opposite?
I know that's a very interesting question, and the answer is even funnier because I don't remember there being a relation. I remember that my homework had to be done before I watched TV, but there was no real restriction on that. Honestly, it felt like TV was going to be there was a TV in the kitchen, a TV in the living room, and then at one point the living room became like this velvet room area, and where there used to be, because there used to be the apartment, there used to be in unit washer and dryer, and so there was like a closing door for that, and it would be right next to the kitchen but my dad put the entertainment center there, so right when we were eating we'd be watching TV, so I would just always we'd be watching TV, talking to each other when we're eating, watching, just hanging out. So TV was a big part of my childhood, but it also was, once I got into video games, that was always tough because like my PC wasn't good enough for PC gaming. My dad had no interest in making it better for gaming. The PlayStation would always get taken from us because we kept playing it too much. But like I would get a Game Boy and I would get this and that. So gaming has always been a big part of my life because I've just been obsessed with it. But it was the same thing where either way I was going to play it, either way I was going to watch what I wanted to watch. But I was definitely gaming a lot.
Well, I think that's so interesting because what you said earlier about like the predated idea of like TV, like that it's bad. And I get that in the past when it was this new thing, it's like, of course, when kids are all of a sudden watching TV, parents are worried. But my TV was restricted. We didn't have cable. I was allowed to watch, but I was definitely more on the strict side where like things had to be done, and like you had to be not just done with your homework, but you had to get good grades before, you got into any of that. But what I realized is like, I think some of that motivation was, oh, we don't want you to grow up and like only be watching TV. So like, that's a bad habit. Yet now I'm an adult and I can do what I want. And I'm like, I bring my like iPad. I walk around my house while I'm like doing laundry and cooking. And I'm like watching all the time. So I'm like, I don't think just because I didn't do it as a kid, like no habits were formed. I mean, I completely still created the habit as an adult all on my own. Well, so there's like just no way to control what happens.
Yeah, well, for me, and the thing that I always saw and what I'm totally avoiding as a parent, and I've just seen it so many times, is when you make it this like special thing that must be avoided, it only makes them want it more. I remember my ex, she was babysitting this family and they had no screen time, no TV time, and then they finally felt that they were the age appropriate way, age appropriate to watch it, and they watched a movie. And she said the way they were looking at the TV was like, oh my gosh. And I feel it was the same way, even with like those two cool parents who like was like, yeah, you could smoke weed, we don't care. Those kids never cared about smoking weed. They never, like, it was because they had the option. And I think that's the thing is like, you get to an age where you want to rebel, you want to do the things you can't do. So putting all this pressure on not doing it, I mean, like it's proven time and time again. I mean, that's the reason why like white women with racist dads love black men. Like it's like you try so hard to like push them away. They're just going to want it more because you're keeping them away versus just letting them have it, see how they really feel about it. You make it that much more special.
Yeah, I mean, man, that's a very, very like a deep interpretation. I feel like, again, it does kind of just go back to parenting. I mean, hopefully, I mean, TV is so much less awful than racism, but I know what you mean because it's sort of like this idea that emotionally you're connecting this like thing, right? What like TV or rebellion or drugs or whatever to your relationship with your parents. And so I feel like what's different about what you're talking about, like letting your daughter have fun when she's over, is that you also have a relationship with your daughter. So it's for her, it's not like, oh, she has to like TV to then spend time with dad. It's just that like that's a bonus. She gets to watch TV. But you're also getting to know her and you have other things. And I think that's the key. Yeah. There is no... It's like these objects and things like that are just objects and symbols. At the end of the day, people are connecting to the person behind it. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense. Because I'm trying to think if I have anything weird. No,
that made sense.
It's not weird, but like if I have weird significance in things in my life like that I wasn't able to do. And
yeah,
maybe drugs, because I really was, not to be like, I don't do a lot of drugs, but I definitely did not do it at all growing up. And I was so like, I had friends who smoked weed, which is very chill in California where I grew up, and I didn't even touch weed. I was just so like, absolutely no, zero tolerance. And it wasn't until I basically got a job, graduated college, like was in my 20s, that I was like, well, I've done all the things that supposedly drugs were supposed to keep me from, and now I haven't done drugs. So I guess I should do drugs now. Like, and so then even making it all that far, I was like, okay, cool. Now I see there's nothing, the thing that people were telling me not to do it for, I passed the test, so now I can do it. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. I guess the eyes light up moment with drugs that those kids babysitting for had. But at the same time, I didn't go too far either. Like, I still feel like I just opened up that part of my life, and then I'm not too far in that either. And so it's just another thing I've added because, I don't know. I guess nothing's good or bad is what I'm trying to say, except how you relate to it.
That's definitely, I think that's 1,000% true. It's just really anything in moderation is fine. Like, my daughter, she'll come and she'll sit down and she'll watch it because there's no restriction. After she'll get bored, because kids have short attention spans anyway, she'll want to like go and have a tea party in her room and go and play with stuff. Like, it's not, and like, that's why it's so funny when people are just talking screen time this, screen time that. When you're like, I remember when I was younger, I'm watching TV, but really I'm just sitting there generating ideas for me to play with, like, my toys. Like, I'm not really actively watching. And I think it really is like one of those things where it's like, all right, either y'all forgot or y'all just, I don't know. One thing that kind of stuck with me the most is is I remember Kevin Smith had this saying where it was like, where they're asking if he'll let his daughter watch R-rated movies, and I'm sure she was older. She's not Naomi's age. She isn't 4, But he was like, yeah, why would I prevent her from watching, the way I make money, and that's kind of how I looked at, screen time and TV, where it's like, it'd be so weird for me to be like, yeah, money is how I'm putting, TV is how I'm putting food on the table, but you can't watch it at all. Don't you dare try.
Yeah, because then there's this sense of like hypocriticism, and then it's like, there's no real reason except for control, I guess. But that's my other question is, so she sort of has the free will to watch whatever she wants. Has she sort of followed in your footsteps in terms of things she's interested in, or maybe she's too young to be like sort of notice any of that? But or do you notice her kind of going a lot like, oh, this is a thing that's totally unique to her that she's just been drawn to?
Yeah, she's still so young where it's like not hyper point. Well, here's the thing is she likes PJ Masks, which is a superhero show, kids show, which I took as a win. And so that was nice. And then the only Miyazaki film I watched ever was Ponyo. So I bought the Miyazaki collection.
Oh my God. I think I saw this on your Twitter and I got excited. And I was going to ask you about it, but I totally
we watched My Neighbor Totoro together, and she really liked that. So I think I'm slowly getting her on the anime train, because she was also watching Gurren Lagann with me while I was watching it. And I think because anime is so expressive, like people make a lot of faces and stuff, like she's really into that. And then she was enjoying Kiki's Delivery Service, but then she got tired and fell asleep.
I love Miyazaki. Totoro was one of the first things I watched too. It was like on one of those VHS where I think my grandma had recorded it. I don't know if she bought it, but it was for sure recorded from something where, like, I don't know. It was one of those things where, like, whenever they would come from Taiwan, they'd be like, we brought this, and it's like on some like cardboard VHS thing. But I remember watching that and I loved it. And my favorite Miyazaki, I don't know if you've seen this yet, but definitely it might be a little old for her now, but Spirited Away is my favorite one. And it's like very, like, it's got that very sort of like sad, sweet mix that I love about Miyazaki. But yeah, I think anime is cool, especially like stories like that, because they're so they're so complex. Not that Disney movies aren't, but Disney tends to follow a formula, whereas I think when you're watching some of these like foreign animes, they're just exposing kids to like a sort of a different, I don't know, it's like a different story that you're not used to seeing every day necessarily growing up here. So then that opens your mind to like different viewpoints, which I think is really cool.
Well, no, I think as someone who just watched it, I think you're right. They're way more complex in the sense that these big ideas aren't kind of, I think in a lot of American children's films, big ideas and huge imaginations are kind of downgraded to child's play, in the sense where if like a kid sees something wonderful, or kids see, the adult always doubts them, the adult always downplays them, and it's them who have to convince the adult. Whereas in Miyazaki, they brought up the suit monsters and goes, oh, that must have been this. Like, he's always on board with them. He never doubts them. He's always supporting their decision to have these big ideas. And I think another thing I really noticed after seeing 2 is so far in Miyazaki films, like the kind of asshole characters, they're just assholes and that's it. Like, they never get their comeuppance. Every time in like American media, if someone's a dick to the main character, at some point in the movie, something has to happen to them that either makes them figure out they're cool or they get in trouble. But like in Totoro, that girl, the boy who's like really mean, but you can tell he kind of has a crush. Nothing happens. Like, it literally, his last scene is him like ignoring the fact that they came to the door. And then in Kiki's Delivery Service, that bratty girl who kind of like is shitting on her just has this party and shits on her grandma's food, and then like is just mean. Like she's never has this coming around moment where she's like, you are cool. And I like that, because that is real life. In real life, you're gonna have shitty people, and there's nothing that's gonna happen that's gonna make them all of a sudden like you. There's nothing that's gonna happen person that's gonna make them get their comeuppance. You just do your thing because they're just on the sideline. And I think that's the bigger takeaway that I think is the difference between Western media and like the Miyazaki films is, people who dislike you or disagree with you are always a roadblock opposition in American media. In Miyazaki, they're just on the sidelines, and you don't have to. You just have to ignore what they're saying. And I think that's true. That's how we should always look at our haters. Is they're just on the sidelines. They're not in your way. And if your hater happens to be a gatekeeper, we need to understand there's multiple gates, and you just gotta go around them.
Oh, I've never thought about that way, but that's so interesting, and you're so right, because like in every movie, even in the Western ones, like villains are, if you were to flip it, like just the protagonist in their story, because technically, like we were talking about, there's no such thing as good or bad. There's definitely good or bad actions, and there's things that hurt people. Yeah. But if you were to, really break it down, a lot of heroes make mistakes, but that's sort of part of their journey. Even like what's that latest Wreck-It Ralph, at the it's the number 2 or whatever, at the end, the little girl, there was like a moment in it where basically her and Ralph like do something where in real life, if that happened, like I think he sabotages her life in a way. It's like, if a friend did that to me in real life, like that's like you're no longer my friend, you're cut out forever. Like that's really shitty. But in the movie world, because we already are told that they're the hero, they can make up and understand like why they did it. But that's a villain move, and a lot of heroes do villain moves. Oh, yeah. In Disney movies, we're just told it's okay because they're the hero. Whereas what you're saying, it's like... Yeah,
if you just understand them.
Yeah, I mean, these assholes, like, they're complex, right, in life. I mean, they're maybe in this moment, like, we're not rooting for them, but there's probably a reason behind that. And so it's not about, like, smushing them or, like, eliminating them for the hero to thrive. It's about the hero's journey is to figure out themselves and how they interact with their world, not getting rid of all the haters. Which weirdly kind of ties into what's happening in our country now. I mean, not to get too political, but I feel like a lot of times on Twitter, people who can't talk to each other are just all about like owning the other team. So it's not really about them growing. It's just about like, as long as you're suffering and you're owned, then I'm good. And it's like, that is very Disney. Yeah. So that's interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Oh yeah, I know. It was something that I know I subliminally held for a long time, because I remember I was writing for this show, and essentially like there's these, if you haven't noticed, any video that goes viral, there will be some like site like Jukin Media or whatever who will hit them up and be like, yo, can we license this? And then you get money when we license this to people. And so anytime a show wants to use like a viral video, they're now being kind of extorted for however much this company wants to get. And like on an ethical level, that is wrong, because one, that the company that's taking it is definitely not giving them 50-50. Yeah. We know Jukin's not giving 50-50 of these deals. Two, it's like it's very predatory, because you're only approaching, like, you're not trying to curate content, you're just finding content that a lot of people like, owning it, so you can make money off of it. And I remember someone explained it to me, and I was like, oh, well, they can't get away with it. And and the person was like, why not? And I go, well, that's wrong. It was like, yeah, but it's legal. And then that's when like I was like, oh, my whole perception of things is like, you think that like, oh, because something is ethically or morally wrong is necessarily illegal, but it's not. And that's because of this sense of justice that a lot of media puts into us, where it's like, if you think it's wrong, there's a way to put a stop to it. But sometimes no. That's why I like, we need more things like Game of Thrones, because that's really what the real world is like. Not trying to sound all like nerdy, but it's like the real world's game. But it really is like there's a game.
Just chaos and everyone's bad? Or what do you mean?
Well, just the sense of the idea of Game of Thrones, and the reason Ned died so quick is because our concept of the way stories like that work is that as long as you're honorable and you do the right thing, you're going to succeed, which is why he had to die so quick, because that is not how things work. It's
almost the opposite of how things work in real life.
Well, there are people in power. There is a system to things, and if you try and buck against it just because you think you have the right one, the people in power can just take you out. And I think that's the real world in the sense of there is I mean, like let's look at like if you're working at a job and you're
No,
the
just
first.
kidding.
Yeah, I know, right? And let's just say a corporate job, and you're the first person of color there, and you notice that they never really hire people of color, and your gut instinct would be like, oh, I should bring this to their attention, and then like they view you as a problem and you pushed out. Now at the end of that, you don't have a job and there's still no people of color there. So then let's do another scenario. You have a job and there's no people of color. They don't hire them, and you ask in an innocuous way, be like, oh man, there's all this, and they're like, yeah, just for some reason, we hire, and that's all this. It's like, okay, cool. And then you like work your way up. You work and you get their trust. You get to the top, and now you're hiring people of color, and they can't tell you to stop because they know, because if they outwardly say they don't want you to do it, then they're in trouble. That's the difference of the Game of Thrones and then doing the Ned Stark way. And that's what I mean when I say it's like the Game of Thrones, where it's like you have to play the game and backdoor change in a lot of situations. I think in this country, in government, that's what we like. The only reason we're even as progressive as we are is because people like AOC are coming in and just taking the democratic route, but they still have progressive policies, but they know they can't just be like, all right, I'm gonna just run this as a socialist and do the socialist game, because they'll be blocked.
Yeah.
So it's like you're gonna come in as a Democrat and you're just gonna do these these like far left leaning policies and really stand up for what you can. And that's why they're opposing her so hard, is because they know she played the game and got in, and they're freaking out because if now you have someone in position with ideals like that who is on a track to where they can become a president. And so they're just trying to start smearing her and making her look bad now because they know she has the potential.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, because that scenario you brought up is like very common in entertainment. And I've talked about scenarios like that with other guests on the pod in like writers' rooms, but it's almost this like paradox where the rooms that are completely white with no writers of color, like they're not getting called out because they're not calling each other out. Well, like, maybe they are, but let's be real, they're not. And so once they finally do hire a person of color, like, and that person speaks up, all of a sudden they all feel uncomfortable. They're like, oh, I knew it. Everything was better before. And it's like, no, you were wrong before. You just weren't getting called out. So it's sort of like that happens so much. And then so being the first person, you do get put in an uncomfortable situation, because it's like, we know what's going on, and it's like, oh, if I want to make change, I gotta like really, like you said, work my way in and then make it. Otherwise they'll be like, we knew it, like we shouldn't have done this to begin with.
Well, because that's the thing, is because the way rooms work is it's all like it's all friends, and it's all like people who are like trying to get their friends in, because we're all stuck in a room for like 8 to 12 hours. So you definitely want someone who's vetted, who is cool, and who isn't going to be at time. So if you like put in your time and you're trusted by these colleagues, and then they're just going to be like you throw a few people of color their way, unless they are truly overtly and 100% racist trying to keep people of color out the room, they're gonna go ahead and listen to you, because they're like, well, we want people of color in here, and this guy is vetting, and he's a person of color we like. It's just that thing, because I think a lot of times, it really is when it's that thing of like all your friends being white, and you get this job, and you're trying to give a job to your friends, but all your friends are white, and then you're afraid to invite a person of color who you don't know because now you're nervous because you don't know because that's the thing is like you.
Well, I think that's a problem by
I
itself too, though, right? Like the idea of when you look around, if all your friends are exactly the same. But I mean, I guess at that point it's like, oh, too late. But I think that is the thing I hear a lot is people will ask, and their heart's in the right place, but people hiring will be like, we have a new spot, and it's like, we really want a woman, or we really want a writer of color, and then they'll say that, and it's like, I get why they say that, because they definitely want that spot not to go to a white person, but that mentality is already starting from a different place. Like, whereas like, if your friends are diverse and you're funny, like more than likely that people you recommend will be diverse. And obviously this is like a bigger, we don't have to get too into it because it's like without them saying that, it won't happen. So I get why they do it. But ideally we're in companies run by people who already are doing that without having to be like, oh, fuck, we forgot the final spot. And then they're like correcting, you know, I don't know. It's just this weird way that they see it as a check mark instead of like, you know, sometimes when I'm booking lineups on comedy shows, like, I don't think about that until the end, and then I'll usually do a glance over and I'm like, usually everything's fine. So it's this different mentality of like, you're starting from who's funniest, and my network just is more diverse. But also because I am like in their eyes diverse, like, you know, I can get why that might happen.
Well, yeah, because you actively, because it's not something you. It's interesting to talk about because it's just the general idea that there are people who don't realize that they only feel comfortable around white people. Like they don't realize it because that's the only excuse I can think of for you to just not have any non-white friends. And I'll see it too because you'll just watch in these spaces, you know, we've all been in improv classes, we've all been in acting classes, and we've seen how the white people will just, you know, kind of stick together and, you know, and really try and link up with their own. And then you'll watch how they kind of talk with and work with people of color. And it's never that same one. Like I'll be scrolling the timeline and see them like doing a meetup, a 6-month meetup, and be like, damn, I didn't even get an invite to that. I mean, I don't care. I probably wouldn't have gone, but it is like interesting to be like, damn, we didn't even get an invite, but that's just how they're just not even thinking. And I've been in places where like literally right in front of you, white people will be like, oh, we should do this together. We should do, okay, cool. Let's do this after we wrap. We're going to do this. Da, da, da. And just
we should go to a Fish concert and listen to Dave Matthews. No, is that racist? I don't know.
Yeah. So it's things like that. And it's so funny because I wonder if it's a thing where, because I feel like it's also just like a, almost on a cultural level where I find that a lot of people of color are like, well, if you're talking about something and someone's in the room, you have to invite them. Like if me and you are in a green room and there's a third person who we don't really know that well, but I'm like, after this, we're going to eat here and this. No matter what, that person's getting an invite because they're in the room. Because it'd be rude for us to talk about it and not invite them. We'd have to. But then on the flip, there's been so many times where I'll be talking about some shit and a white person will just invite themselves. So I'm wondering if they're like, if they want to go, they would have just invited themselves.
That's funny. I mean,
you know what I mean?
It's also like funny because I've seen where people are so careful, right? Because they don't want to be seen as racist. Instead of the whole idea of equality is just like, be a fucking person and treat people like people. But I understand, like, obviously it's a sensitive time. I mean, I'm not that empathetic, but I kind of get it. Like when people are very careful where they are afraid to call you out on anything because they're like, oh, what if that's an Asian thing? But you know, it's like that's also like racist in a way, because I've had that where I'll start telling a story, you know, of like maybe a trip to Taiwan, and some of it's like weird things that people did, not like Taiwanese people do, you know, like it's just, oh, a funny thing that happened. But then I'll just get this like really like overzealous enthusiasm, like, oh, that's really interesting. And I'm like, God damn it. Like you just are trying really hard to have the right reaction as opposed to just hearing the story and reacting as you would. And that also happens because if you're the only person in the room, they can't compare to anybody. Like if there were like 8 Asian people in a room and I was telling a weird story or being weird, they would just be like, Teresa's being weird. But if I'm the only one, they'd be like, oh, we can't be mean to the one Asian person being weird.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. It's so wild. Is it? Yeah, and then really like all these problems are solved by just hanging around with more people of color.
Yeah.
Because it's so funny because when you are hanging out with a white person who hangs, like whenever I'm with a white person who hangs out with a lot of black people, you just see how comfortable they are. And sometimes I'm like, damn son, you too comfortable. But like, it is like the difference of just because you don't have to worry about everything you said because you've already either have made those mistakes or just those people, so you've already had those discussions.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in a way, I'm going to tie this back to the TV and movies because so much of like what we've watched like visually growing up and here and whatever, and the storylines do affect how we view the world and interact with people. So I do kind of think like if you have like access to just more culture, it like, because there's movies and TV shows and all this stuff, like if you're exposing yourself to more than just like one, Disney princess mainstream format, then you're by default already opening yourself up to like just different viewpoints. So I do sometimes think about like when I'm living my life and I'm like, oh, I don't know, like personally I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do about like I really want this thing, but it feels like if I go for this job, this is a bad example, but like, oh, I'm doing it for money reasons versus like what's socially responsible. I will think about movies that I've seen and be like, okay, well, what did I like about this character? Do I want to be like that? And that sounds so cliche, but I do think they affect us so much. So I think that's like another argument for watching more movies and TV shows, because you are learning and you watch characters make those mistakes. You watch characters say dumb things, and then they have their arc. So then you can actually learn from that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, I'm sure you're just like, I just wanted to be a cool dad. I don't know.
I mean, no, I definitely do. Like, I definitely do like get inspired by specific characters and the way they approach things. So no, I'm right there with you. I do want to be a cool dad.
Yeah, kind of to round it out. Is there anything that you'd be like, my daughter can't watch this? This is bad, or like quality, or just in general, like no. I hope if she likes this, I'm still saying no. Or you're just like, we'll see what she likes.
No, I'll see what she likes. I'll try and I'll try and keep her in the PG lane. Like I'll wait till I'll say probably like 11, 12. She'll be in PG-13 unless it's a movie I feel like she must see, because I'm not necessarily afraid of my daughter hearing curse words. Like everyone, if they curse around my daughter, they're like, oh no. And it's like, no, I think it's good for adults to curse around kids because like that's how you teach them that boundary. Like why am I making you censor yourself what? No, if my daughter says it, she's in trouble and she needs to know she's in trouble. And definitely say it. And when she asks why, it's like, because that's adult language. You don't use that as a kid. And that's one thing I definitely want to do and make sure I do is just if there's something she can't do, always be able to say why. Like I never want to run off of I told you so.
Oh, that's such a good framing too, the idea of cursing as boundaries, because calling it adult language is such a straightforward, consistent rule because you're an adult and she's not. Yeah. As opposed to being like, this is forbidden and off limits and I can't tell you why, because that's what makes kids go out and like say swear words to each other because it's like titillating to say forbidden things. As opposed to being like, the boundary was very clear. The boundary's not changed. The rule's not different for me. Like when I was a kid, I got in trouble and now I'm an adult and I'm allowed. And so it's like so much clearer for them.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And that's the thing and that's one of those things that goes back to what I was saying about like kind of building for her future is I want her to feel comfortable questioning authority because there should be a reason for anything. It's going to be interesting in school if a teacher approaches me where she's like, I told her because I said so and she got mad. I was like, well, I'm going to ask that you explain why because I don't want her blindly following authority, especially as a black person. It's like, no, I my daughter, she's like semi-passing. Let her use that privilege in her blood to question cops and to and get to the bottom of why they might be annoying her at the time for no reason. And I think everyone should feel comfortable questioning authority. I mean, I feel, for obvious reasons, some people may not feel comfortable questioning authority, but just it is our right to know. Even when we're being arrested, a cop has to tell us, are we being arrested and why? They'll try and pretend like they don't have to, but they do.
Yeah. Well, what if, though, okay, hypothetical, she grows up and she's like, my favorite podcast is the Joe Rogan podcast. Would you be like, yeah, that's cool?
Yeah, I'll support her. Let her.
It's a joke.
Look, get lifted, get all nice and buff. It's funny because his podcast probably is still going to be going.
Oh, no, you're breaking up. Wait, hello?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I think I cut you off, though.
Oh, no, it's all good. No, I was just saying that the Joe Rogan podcast probably still will be going by the time she's an adult.
She's just like a frat bro, completely just like conspiracy theorist.
She writes for Barstool Sports 2.0.
Oh, my God. Oh, geez. Well, thank you so much for
right,
sharing
maybe
that. I have a quick
that.
game. Do you want to play this game?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay, it's a very stupid game, and it's inspired by your love of video games and your horniness on Twitter. Okay, it's called If It Exists. So according to the rule of internet and porn, if it exists, there's porn for it. Except for
Rule 34?
Porn of my ex apologizing, because I've looked that up. It doesn't exist yet, but one day. But overall, if there's a character with tits and thing, it's probably been drawn in some positions that are questionable for the TV. So this is a very simple game. I will say a video game, and then you try to come up with the porn parody title. So, for example, Super Smash Bros. Would be like Super Smash Bang Bros, that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just kind of a fun, dumb game. I actually was going to try to look up real ones and have you guess, but I had to stop. So there's too many people with talented artistic skills with crazy imaginations on Reddit. So I had to stop looking at those. Okay. Okay. Here's the first one. Fortnite.
I think just go for the low hanging fruit and call it fuck night.
Oh, okay, there you go. That's a good one. I also wrote 4 Fingers Night. That could work. Maybe 4 in 1 night. Okay, Assassin's Creed.
Ooh, Assassin's Seed.
Ooh, okay, that's a good one. Or Ass and Ass. Okay. Red Dead Redemption.
Ooh. Okay. Okay.
You could say skip if you can't think of one too.
No. I'm coming up with one for everyone.
Okay.
Red in Bed Redemption.
Oh man. Okay. Little period sex reference there. Okay.
Yeah.
Dark Souls. I have one for this.
Man.
That's very dumb.
Dong Souls.
Oh, that's a good one. I wrote Dark Holes.
Ooh, that's better.
Okay. World of Warcraft.
Ooh. Well, there is a porn parody called World of Horcraft, so I won't use that.
Oh,
That's
okay.
a real porn parody.
That's a real one.
Yeah.
Is it a game? That's good. That's very iffy. I feel like we should end on that. That's perfect. I did write World of Huge Chef, but I like World of Eat Ass better. So we're going to end on World of Eat Ass. If there's any game designers out there who love to eat ass, make it happen. Yeah. And then at Ify. Ify, where can people find you and at you?
You can find me on Ify Nwadiwe on Twitter and Instagram.
And you can follow this podcast at Tell Me Anything Pod. Follow me at Larissa T on Twitter and Instagram. And that's it. Thanks for listening, guys.